Just real quick, first thing I wanted to let everybody know, first of all, thank you for coming out. Okay. Hopefully the rain will hold off a little bit longer. It's been kind of funny the past couple of days. One of the most important things I will tell you tonight, if you're looking for a bathroom, straight back the hall. Okay, that's where the bathroom's at. If you need, you already found it. Okay, good, good. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Lisa to start. You want to?
Yeah, Marsha, would you lead us in some prayer, please?
Dear Heavenly Father, here, wonderful chosen these people meeting and that these two glory to your
Okay, so again, well, thank you all for being here. I am Lisa White, and I'm the delegate for District 96. And we just wanted to, Chris and I just kind of wanted to update you on some of the bills that passed. I hope you all got a list of them. There was 249, I believe. The governor has signed 230 of them, or vetoed some of them. And there's still a few left that he's looking at and that he may veto too. The ones he is vetoing, I'll just give you a little explanation on that. Some of the ones he's vetoing right now are ones that had fiscal notes to them, but didn't have a way to subsidize them. And he was not going to raise any more taxes or put any more money into the budget to pay for the bills that weren't offset by some other money. So if the delegate that put in the bill that introduced it and it got passed, if there was no way to fund that without raising taxes, he's vetoing those bills. So I personally think that, you know, a lot of the work that he's doing right now is very courageous because he is really looking at the budget very methodically. Chris and I did not vote for the budget because it was way too high. And there's just money going places that just don't make sense. And he's really taken a look at that. He did veto a lot of the line items in the budget, and you can see those online. You can look that up of what he did take out of the budget itself that passed. He vetoed several of those line items in the budget. You know, this was our first time there, and it was very interesting. And Chris will tell you some more of it too. But you know, when you're there, it's like you think you're going to go and you're going to just have all these bills passed. Like there's a list of Chris's bills that he was the lead sponsor for. I did 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 of them, or something like 8, 9, and so one of my bills almost got on the agenda. Well, I did get on the agenda, and then it got taken off the agenda. I think one of his bills got on the agenda, taken off, and then a similar bill. But I'll let him talk to you about that. Came through the Senate, but it's not as easy as you think, and you know, some of it is done by design to slow things down because you want to be purposeful when you're, you know, passing legislation because it is going to become law. And so some of that slowness and that is by design. Some of it is just very controlling. So there's a lot of control by just a few people, really. And I mean, that's just the way the system is set up. Now, they changed some of the rules when we got there this year. So some of the legislators that weren't freshmen were also getting used to some of the new rules. And they were doing things in committee where before they would have the hearings on the floor so everybody could hear them. They moved those into the committee setting. So you had a big, huge process. And if I leave anything out, jump in. But so you would have to, you know, first of all, you would get your bill. You take it down to bill drafting. They would draft your bill. You bring it back. You'd have to review it, and then you'd send it back with signatures of other co-sponsors if you got any, and they would assign it a bill number. then the speaker would assign it to a committee. So it would go to a committee. In the committee, you had a first reading on it, you had a hearing on it, then you had a markup reading on it, and then it was passage to come out of the committee. So it was 3 different days that you had to listen to what was going on with that bill, and a hearing on it. So you could bring in, the committees could bring in outside people and talk about the bill and for, against, or whatever. But it was a very controversial bill, which I'll let Chris talk about, the vaccine bill, because he was on the health committee. It took forever. So I was on the education committee, and we did have a lot of bills come through there. Once they did or didn't, if they got passed, then it went to first reading on the floor. Then it went through second reading where you could amend them. And then that went through a whole voting process on the amendments. And then the final day was the third reading where it either passed or did not. And then it would go to the Senate, and the Senate would go through the same process. It would go through a committee, would get assigned a committee, go through committee, have all the 3 days of hearings, mark up all of that, and then it would go to the floor at their chamber. That would go through 3 different days of readings, and then if it passed, and if it was one of our bills and they put an amendment on it, then it would come back to us, and we'd have to go through the same process all over again. So when you really want a bill to go through and you're just like watching it, like watching paint dry, it's pretty frustrating. But and what we were told, freshmen usually don't get a lot of bills through. You really have to work your bill. You have to follow them around like little chihuahuas and nipping at their heels, like, are you going to put my bill on the agenda? What are you going to do? So you really have to work that bill and follow it and really push it. I did have one that was going to get on the agenda in the health committee, which was a scope of practice bill, which was going to open up the scope of practice for PAs, NAs, and CRNAs, so they would not have to be under the supervision of doctors, which would help in our rural communities. A lot of young people cannot get medical treatment, and they can't get doctor's appointments and things like that. So they would be able to have that service. It would be much easier. Actually, our Berkeley County Board of Education was really behind this and pushing it. So, that was one of and I actually worked with another freshman delegate on that. He was trying to get that through too. So we kind of joined forces and met with nurses and talked to them about that. So it got on the agenda, but there was a bill that was coming through from the Senate that they wanted to get passed. So they asked, can we please hold ours off until next year? And that's another thing too. You're always negotiating. We want to get this done. Can you pull that? Can you do that? So I kind of, played ball a little bit better. He very disciplined. I mean, this man, he is on it. Like, he just focused on it. I couldn't have been there without him, I can tell you, because he was really helpful in a lot of the things that we did, and we did it together. And but you see the list of bills. There's over 2,000 or so bills that get introduced. So, when you're going through this process, the first few weeks is very slow, methodical, because you're just getting started. And then the last 3 weeks, you're like, working like crazy. Yeah, it's like, read this bill, and you have to read like, I don't know, 30 of them by the next day to decide how you want to vote on them or not vote on them. So it's a lot. And they kept saying it's like drinking from a fire hose, because it really is. But there was bills that I was more focused on, that Chris was more focused on, that we really took a look at and paid more attention to than some of the other bills. Some of those bills were like the vaccine bill that he'll talk about, because he was in health committee. Puberty blockers, he'll get into more detail with that. Mine were education, the DEI bill that we did repeal, the DEI for higher education. We did also do a bill, and I actually got to watch this bill get resurrected. It was dead. We had a lot of good bills come over from the Senate that did not get through the House because they just wouldn't do it. And that was very frustrating too, because we would look at each other and say, are we in a Republican room? I'm not sure. I don't think we are. But basic things that the Republican platform is, it was really hard to get some of that stuff to go through. Now the Senate became very conservative, and they were sending really good bills over. But one of those was the introduction bill. It was the how would I what did they call it even?
I forget what the
It
term
was
of
154. I'm trying to think of what. Prohibiting sexual orientation instruction in public schools. It bans the teaching in sexual orientation and ensures that the importance that education is not being used to indoctrinate students, and that it is important to empower parents. So what the bill literally does is that if a child comes to a teacher or anybody that works at the school and says, I'm confused, I'm gender confused, I'm this, I'm that, the teacher or anybody that they talk to within the school system has to tell the parent. And what has been happening up until this point in some of our schools, and I know it's happening in Berkeley County schools, they're not telling the parent. And so, and one of the teachers that was in the education committee, he would almost go to tears when talking about this because he was so tired of seeing these kids so confused. They're in elementary school and they're worrying about this. I don't know about you, but puberty was hard. I didn't need all this confusion, and that bill died from the Senate. It was going to die. It wasn't going to get out of committee in my committee. And one of our young delegates, he went around, he had to get 13 people to sign saying that they were going to vote yes on this bill to get it out of committee. And he got 13 people to do it. They still balked at it. Some of them still were balking at it because they did not want to be seen on roll call voting for something like this. And because thanks to John Overington, we do have roll call votes. And they, because believe it or not, some of the counties in West Virginia are not conservative. They're not. So they run as Republicans because that's the thing to do, but they're not really that conservative. So some of the delegates are, they are focused on their constituents and what their constituents want, and they're really not as conservative as we are here in the Eastern Panhandle, that's for sure. So you're fighting against that too. But it finally did get out of committee, and it passed all the way. So that was very exciting. People reluctantly, had to vote yes, and some people were voting yes like this. But they did vote yes on that bill. There was another one that came out of our committee too that didn't, well, the DEI bill, that bill. There was one other big one that came out of the education committee. I can't think of what that was.
You
now.
were there, not me.
I know. Parental rights. Yeah, the discipline one that came out of our committee. So that was a really good one too. We did get one bill that was safer schools SROs. We did get that done. So we did do some good things out of the education committee. Higher education. This is controversial, I know, but I'm going to say it anyway because it's just who I am. But the higher education part of it, it was just, it was one money bill after the other. And there was one bill that they wanted to pay for all of the college students' toiletries. And it was going to be the most complicated thing. They were going to have to
a
go.
Republican introduced that.
Yes, a Republican. And then and you had to go. They had to sign up at which toiletry they were going to take, how much money it was. So they were going to have to hire somebody to control that, how that was going to get distributed, how much money it was. It was the most cumbersome, ridiculous bill I've ever seen. And I'm thinking, you're going to college. Buy your own damn toothbrush. This is ridiculous. So, so thank God we killed that. We killed that one. But there was a lot of them like that. Like, it was just appropriations after appropriations for higher. We're talking $300 and some million going to colleges for certain things. And you've got other agencies, that aren't getting the money that they need. And then we're putting all this money over here. And that's one of the reasons why I voted against the budget. We require reports from DHS and all the other departments. We require reports on how they're spending the money. Sometimes they get them to us, sometimes they don't. They don't get them to us on time. We don't do anything about it. I don't understand it, but that's what's happening. And to me, before I'm gonna vote for some budget that was like $1 bazillion, I wanna know where the money is actually going. And I want these reports coming in so that we can take a look at them, and not at the last minute, right? Not at the last week before we've got to sign off on this budget, and we don't get to see the reports anyway. So, you really have to, I don't even know how you get the report. You can request them and look at them online and go through them. And we're going to do that between now and the next session. But that was just some of the stuff that I saw that I couldn't believe. And, and we passed some of those out of higher education. And, when we saw that, and I knew they were coming, but he didn't know they were coming. He's like, what is this $314 million appropriation? I'm like, yeah, that's a hard no. But, it was just that kind of stuff that I think we need to really be more methodical on. And I am, very fiscally responsible. So I really want to dive into how the money's being spent. But we did do a lot of socially conservative bills. That some. There was quite a few. I in my opinion, there was quite a few that are going to be, I think, big things for West Virginia to be deterrents for people like, oh, I ain't moving there. Yeah. But some of the things that we couldn't get through as a basic Republican platform, pro-life issues, things like that, I just couldn't. Repealing certificate of need, all of those things I'm going to let Chris talk about. I just couldn't. I don't know. We did do a Parents' Bill of Rights, though. That was a good bill, too. We did Troops to Teachers. That was a very good bill as well. And, we did establish mother and baby's pregnancy support. I'm a big advocate of that because I'm very pro-life. And I think Republicans sometimes drop the ball on, don't have an abortion, but we're not going to help you. So I think that that's a really important thing, too, that we need to help the mothers and the fathers with their decision making and help them and support them and support pregnancy centers like Obamacare, and there's other ones across the state. So we did get that through. The House did $1 million, the Senate added $2 million, and that came back over. So we did do that too, and they did eliminate the West Virginia Office of Equal Opportunity. So
that was a fun fight.
So that was a fun fight too. So so they did do that too. So and they did do the universal professional occupational licensing, so that it makes it easier for people to come over state lines, Virginia and Maryland, to work here. So I will save questions for later. I'll let him go. Is that okay? And then you can ask questions later. So now I'm going to turn it over to you to kind of talk about all the bills you had fun with.
Oh, yes. Okay. Well, I'm Chris Andrews. I'm the delegate for the 97th House of Delegates seat. I have worked in politics for 18 years. First time elected, however. Now, let me give you the 1,000-foot view first. Supposedly in West Virginia, we have 91 Republicans in the House. Supposedly in West Virginia, we have 91 Republicans in the House. We have 91 people who ran as Republicans, right? Because that's the only way to get elected. But if you talk to half of them, they were a Democrat 3 years ago, right? I just call them undocumented Democrats. That's the way I look at them. Because, and I'm always blunt on things. If you took the gun issue off, because they know they can't vote against 2A, they can't vote against guns. You took that off the table, a lot of the so-called Republicans might as well be card-carrying members of the Communist Party. It was bad. I was on the Health Committee. I want to talk about a couple things that we did do, and then I'll talk about the Health Committee, which was an absolute train wreck. But anyhow, some of the stuff you guys might have noticed, we did stop the 1% sales tax increase, right? Yay.
Safer Communities Act.
Oh, yeah, they named it the Safer Communities Act, just like they named the Fourth Amendment, Destruction Act, the Patriot Act, right? They called this the Safer Communities Act because what they were doing is they were using, police, EMS, and firefighters as a ploy to get this passed. And I'm sure they're going to be yelling at me, oh, you didn't vote to fund this, I'm like, no, they're one of the core functions of government. They should be funded first before you do dog parks, maybe before bike trails, okay? If public safety is number one, fund it first. Don't use it as a bargaining chip to jack up everybody's taxes, because we are taxed way too much already. Our founding fathers would be disgusted at what we're putting up with. Yeah, they're spinning so fast you can feel it. Like Lisa said, we both voted against the bloated state government budget. I swore I would never vote for a budget that did not reduce the size and scope of government, and guess what this one didn't do, right? So I voted against that. We did fight a lot for medical freedom. I'm going to talk about the vaccine bill now. Does anybody know there was a big fight over forced vaccinations in West Virginia, maybe? I was on the health committee. There were 25 people in the health committee. There were 3 documented Democrats on the health committee. There were maybe 4 Republicans on the health committee. And everybody else might as well have been a Democrat. And we fought really hard because the governor did the executive order for philosophical and religious and expanded the medical exemptions. And me, I'm like, just saying no is good enough. You don't have to justify why you don't want to have something put in your body or your child's body. It's your right, period, end of story. But in the health committee, it was a train wreck. And what you saw, if you're sitting there, the hospital lobbyists showing up in their $2,000 suits, and big pharma reps showing up in their $2,000 suit, and you're standing there in your $200 suit, maybe on a good day, right? And they're handing out campaign donations like Easter candy, right? And so the bill stalled out in the health committee. There was a lot of fighting. They eventually worked out a deal to gut the bill just to get it to the floor. Of course, I voted against it. I will never vote for a watered down bill, period, end of story. Or beer. Yeah, don't. I actually don't drink beer, which is odd. But anyhow, but they got the bill to the floor, and then there were about 6 or 7 of us in the House. We were kind of like in our own little mini caucus, right? And it was myself, Lisa, Laura Kimball, Ian Masters, Henry Dillon, Coop Gonzalez, yeah. And we were kind of, and Teresa Howe, we were our own little mini caucus. And so we put together all the amendments to restore the bill for philosophical and religious exemptions. That was a huge fight. I watched virtually everybody who spoke against that bill on the floor, against it, or against restoring it, was a Republican. You know, the freedom and liberty people, right? And so ended up, we did get only religious exemptions in. And I don't think you should have to pass a religious test. You shouldn't have to say, look, I'm a card-carrying member of the Baptist church or whatever. I'm like, whatever. Just say no. That's good enough. We finally got that in on Friday, but come Monday, 13 people who voted for it on Friday had flipped and voted against it and killed the bill. I wonder who they were talking to all weekend. So anyhow, that fight's not over. The governor's executive order standing. We're going back at it. There's a lot of time and a lot of effort on that one. We did pass the ban on chemical castration of minors. The puberty blocker bill. We got that done. That was a tough bill, but I stood and spoke both in committee and on the floor because I think children live a hard enough life without somebody telling them God created a mistake. You're a mistake. You should have been something different. You can't mess with kids like that. They did eliminate the DEI programs. We did pass the Parents' Bill of Rights. It passed, it was like 89-11 that said parents have control. You ready for this? I just talked about the vaccine bill that died. Parents have control over the education and medical care of their children. They voted for that, and a week later they're shooting down the bill that says the same thing. There's no consistency, right? We did protect girls' sports. We passed the Raleigh Gaines Act, which was vitally important. I did try my best to stop the rain tax in Berkeley County. Ran in bills, worked with a lot of people trying to get that passed. And I will tell you, and this will probably go everywhere, and I don't care. The Berkeley County Commission spent more time in Charleston than I think they did in Martinsburg. They don't like me much, and bless their hearts. So anyhow, they were down there. That fight's not over. Everybody hates the rain tax. I don't know anybody likes the rain tax, right? But because West Virginia is a Dillon rule state, counties can only do what the state allows them to. So we can control that. We can stop that at the state level. Another bill I put in that I was really furious never moved was the Fourth Amendment Restoration Act. Are you guys familiar with what's happening in Marion County right now? Oh, have you read 1984 yet? Okay, you're familiar with Big Brother, right? What's happening in Marion County, thanks to Shelley Moore Capito and Joe Manchin, I'm good at naming names. They get money. They got money from the federal government to put this smart city initiative in Marion County. And what they're doing is they are using these fusion centers to tie together everything from street cameras to like stoplight cameras to store cameras, security cameras, and they're tracking everybody by facial recognition on a 28-hour rolling cycle. Right? And that, to me, I think we have a Fourth Amendment. They're not allowed to do that without a warrant. So I put in a bill to restore the Fourth Amendment, saying no, you can't do that without a warrant. Well, the two rhinos, I said that run both the House Judiciary and the Senate Judiciary, looked at me and said, "We're not running that bill because it looks to me like the Mexican drug cartels wrote that bill." I'm like, what? Why? Apparently they're trying, whenever they want to take away your constitutional rights, they either tie it up, this is for the children, or this is against drugs, or, oh, don't forget about the terrorists over here, right? And so they wouldn't move the bill. But we're not done on that one. We're going to keep fighting on that one. Let's see, what else? I'll have a little bit more fun here. Oh, yeah. Certificate of need repeal. You guys familiar with what a certificate of need is? Does anybody not know?
What certificate of need?
Okay. If there is a hospital in an area and a competing hospital wants to show up, they have to get the existing hospital's permission. This was a program that was rolled out in the 1970s that even the American Medical Association says you should get rid of, but we still have it in West Virginia. I was on the health committee. That bill came in. We were going to repeal it to allow, the free market to work, to allow innovative health providers to come to West Virginia. Stunning. And competition does what? Creates better service and lowers prices. We had that before the committee meeting. We had it ready to pass 15-10. Now keep in mind, there were only 3 card-carrying Democrats, but we had it 15-10. We get in the meeting. What do? They flipped because there sat the hospital association in his $2,000 suit, right? I had a lot of fun with him in committee. He and I kind of went back and forth. If you ever saw Ron Paul go after the Federal Reserve, that was kind of me in the hospital association. So that didn't pass, but I wasn't done with that bill because while bills, and Lisa explained very well, bills go to committee and they have to pass committee to go to the floor, there's a little known mechanism and a procedure you can use called a discharge that you can move on the floor to take the bill out of committee, bring it to the floor for immediate consideration, right? So I discharged the certificate of need repeal. It failed, but you know what? We got the roll call vote of everybody on the floor. I also discharged.
Can I say something about that?
Yeah, go ahead.
For you, because so the controversy with the discharge vote is that, and now we can't even do it, I guess, but is that if you vote for the discharge, so this is how they spin it. This is how they were spinning it. I wasn't voting against the repeal of the CON. I was voting for not to have the discharge go through because it wasn't following procedure. But what I learned last night on a phone call, and I didn't remember this, and you probably caught this, but I didn't. The speaker actually said, voting for this discharge is a vote to repeal for the bill. So
Right.
the bill could go forward. It's not to vote.
He wrote an amicus brief
Yeah,
and listed it 3
yeah,
times.
he said it is a vote for the bill. So so they can't spin it because he did say that, and I'd forgotten that he said that. But so people that voted against it were going, no, I just voted against that because I didn't want the discharge because it wasn't going through procedure. But he said specifically, a vote for this is a vote to repeal the CON.
So let's be frank. Would you rather have policy or procedure?
Yeah,
I'd rather get the policy, right?
yeah.
And by the way, after I did that, now of course I wasn't well liked to begin with because Lisa and I were, there's like a handful of us always screaming roll call because a lot of votes go through without a roll call vote. And every opportunity I had, I screamed roll call to get people on record, right?
You want
Because-
to know how your delegate is.
Right. Because, if not, and they can get away with the voice vote, then they can go run around the next election. Oh, look at me. I'm Republican. I'm conservative, right? But if you have a documented vote, that's important because unless the people stand up and fix this problem, there's maybe 30 Republicans in the House of West Virginia right now. Maybe 30 on a very good day, okay? So after they did that, then they started blocking the motions portion of the agenda. So you couldn't discharge anymore, so I couldn't do it anymore, right? So then I found a neat little trick to use. Oh, guess what? I can submit a motion to discharge in writing, and they have to recognize it. So, because I put in the bill to eliminate or to actually ban the trafficking of abortion pills in West Virginia. Because while we are a life at conception state, if you're 14 years or older currently in West Virginia, you can go on your phone and you can order them with no medical supervision, without your parents knowing. They show up, you take them. Women are flooding emergency rooms because they're taking them at different times in their pregnancy. They haven't been checked out by a doctor. And scary thought, it's going into the public water supply. And the public water supply only gets rid of substances, not chemicals. So they're starting to become, because there's 30 million tons annually going into the public water supplies. And so expectant mothers are starting to have miscarriages from drinking public water. This should be a no-brainer for Republicans to pass, right? We have life at conception. Let's just stop this, abortion pill trafficking. But the speaker said, no, not one single bill, pro-life bill, is going to pass this time. He and I had quite a big fight, okay? In fact, he's promised almost six figures to anybody that will run against me in the next election. Bless his heart, bring it. Anyhow, so I submitted it in writing, right? I walked it up. I took a little video so they couldn't say I didn't do it. I took a video, whistling, going down the aisle and putting it on the podium. And they tried to skip over it. I objected. Everybody knew what they were voting to skip over, which is a vote on ending these abortion pills coming into the state. Still lost it. I had 30 some, like I said, it might be 30 some Republicans. I had about 30 with me. So that failed. And finally, the thing that really made me mad is about 3/4 of the way through the session, there's a committee called the Rules that the speaker's in charge of. Suddenly there's a bill on the floor. It came out of the Rules Committee. We didn't know it was coming. To exempt the legislature from FOIA.
Oh, yeah.
Yes. The speaker put forward your Freedom of Information Act. They wanted to hide everything they were doing as legislators. And it didn't go through the regular process. The speaker shepherded it out of his own committee called Rules. We didn't even know it showed up. Of course, we voted against it. But again, roll call vote, we roll called it, and guess what it did? It passed the House again. But it died in the Senate. So what I like about that, if you think about it, they all stuck their neck out and went on record trying to hide what they're doing from the public to get nothing.
And you want to see the pathetic excuses 2 of them put on Facebook.
Oh,
Yeah.
Lisa and I work for you. That's what we do, right? Well, I always say I work for the Constitution first because the Constitution is what protects you, right? And then I work for the people, right? We're not hiding anything. Now, I don't want people to see the text between my wife and I, obviously, right? But any official communications, I don't care. Look at it. You're fine with it. Our communication back and forth, fine. Look at it, right? People should know what those that are serving them are doing. Well, they're very worried about the Doge, and they're also worried about, I wonder if there's some undue influence from some lobbying groups. So, but anyhow, I could go on for ages, and there were times I stopped going to the Republican caucus. By the way, I just stopped going because there weren't Republicans there. So anyhow, so
Yeah, so on the vaccine bill too, getting back to that, so I was trying to find the number here, and I can't remember, did it
460?
pass or it didn't pass? Where we took away, yeah, it did pass, but we took away some of the rights of the State Board of Education, right? We're trying to, so that eliminating some of their power. We're being threatened that it's probably gonna have to go to the Supreme Court, blah, blah, blah. But, you know, one of the delegates, Delegate Kimball is trying to, she put it in this time, but we're going to try it again next year, is to at least, at the very least, have 3 of the State Board of Education positions elected. So I hope that goes through. But what happened was, and this shows you the kind of power that they think they have anyway, is because the vaccine bill didn't go through, the superintendent of schools decided she was going to put out a letter saying that all the kids that weren't vaccinated properly were going to get kicked out of the school if they weren't vaccinated by a certain date. Well, it only took about, I don't know, an hour or something. And I would have loved to have been a fly on the wall when the governor said, excuse me, that's not what's going to happen. So she rescinded it because he has an executive order. Even though we didn't codify it into law this time, doesn't matter. He has an executive order, and the schools have to follow that executive order, and so does she. And, you know, I mean, I wish he would have just said, no, you're gone.
we have way too many unelected bureaucrats. And one thing we're working on already for next year that we should have done this year, but it didn't hit me till like 3/4 of the way through where we couldn't do any more bills, and that's a trigger law.
Mm-hmm.
Are you guys familiar with how the trigger law works?
How does
Okay.
it work?
Back before Roe versus Wade was overturned, a lot of states passed life at conception legislation so that when Roe versus Wade, or if it was overturned, then automatically life at conception would happen in their state, and then people couldn't kill babies anymore, right? A good thing, right? I wanted to do the same thing with the Department of Education because President Trump keeps talking about getting rid of the Department of Education and block granting the money back to the states. So we're working on legislation that instead of just going to the Board of Education where they have all this money to spend, you know, like drunken college kids on spring break with their parents' credit card, we're going to make the money follow the student. So it'd be actually de facto universal school choice. So that's big because our school system has failed our children. I'm not blaming the teachers. What I'm saying is the system has failed. I don't think we can fix that system. I think the best thing we can do is get the money to the parents. It would work out to be about $9,000 per student, and they can decide where to send their child. And some people have come up to me, well, what if suddenly, you know, Muslims create a school somewhere? Okay. If they want to send their kids there, okay, that's the parents' right. You know, freedom means people get to do things you don't agree with sometimes, right? But at the same time, we could send our kids where we want to go, where we want our kids to go. And I think that's the only real answer. So you had your hand up earlier.
I want to segue for both of you guys because she was talking about that was my main reason for coming tonight. I'm gonna take you guys down a rabbit hole here. So my wife and I moved here in 2021.
Mhm.
We came from California. I worked for a Republican congressman out there. At our house, we call it Peggy and Earl. Okay? West Virginians used to Peggy and Earl, but I could ask questions. We are not Peggy and Earl. Okay, so we got here. I send a FOIA out probably every other day. Okay? So I was watching this FOIA thing very closely because Michigan, now this should alarm everyone, Michigan did pass the FOIA to get rid of the legislature and the governor's office. I do government contracting. I talked to a subcontractor today, and they said, hey, I have Riley Moore's office. I'm dragging them, kicking and screaming, force the FBI to look at this bid that it was $9 million. They didn't even grade it, right? So the subcontractor on the phone, they said, he goes, we have the same situation with one state in the country. I already know who it is. It's Michigan. Same one I had. The guy's like dying laughing, right? We're dangerously close to becoming Michigan, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when we moved here, we went to go vote. We voted down in Bennington. Notice people were a little bit too friendly to us, okay? So we took note of it, right? We have voted at 3 different polling stations. We noticed that we were treated differently at 3 different polling stations. The protocols were all 3 different, right? We ran into Alon Jenkins. We said, hey, you have a very
Yeah.
interesting, so it gets better. So I said, we have a very interesting mayor in our city.
Mhm.
I was one that doesn't have the educational background and probably doesn't have enough sobriety for the position that he has as an executive director, okay? So we looked into the voter rolls, the count. She goes, I got a percentage that night of the vote. My wife and I almost fell off the chair. So I did a FOIA for the Republican voters and the voter roll for City of Martinsburg. They fought me tooth and nail on it, okay? I did a FOIA for the volunteer list, which is public record, okay? Everyone's friend, Mr. Delegati, okay, threatened me an email with legal prosecution without giving me the list. He still has not done it, okay? So then we went from that point to, I contacted the Secretary of State by FOIA. I said, do you agree with their statement that I'm not entitled to the voter list? So when we did that FOIA with the Secretary of State, our house got swatted in Martinsburg, right? 8:30 at night. Oh, it gets better. I'm not even halfway done. So 8:30 at night, I told my wife that morning, I said, honey, we were anticipating it. I said, get ready, they're coming tonight. Right? My wife was up front. My wife was a 3-time cancer survivor going through chemotherapy. They came guns blazing down. We live in a 5-house cul-de-sac, right? Cops show up, and what they said to us is, oh, we got a 911 call here. I said, what's the last 4 numbers? And they go, oh, we can only give the last, what's the phone number? He said, we can only give the last 4, right? So I offered to let them walk around my house. I encouraged them to knock on both the neighbor's house. The neighbor had a shed behind us. They knocked on one house and left. So I said, okay, we're gonna play that game. 2 days later, I FOIA'd the body cam footage, right? So God works in mysterious ways. A couple months ago, I ran into one of my neighbors at the gym, and we had gotten the CAD from the city, looked up the phone number, I reverse engineered who it was. It was the neighbor behind us, so they said, oh, the call was within 6 feet of her house. So I want you all to understand something. City of Martinsburg police officers, best case scenario, were trying to tell me that my wife could have been killing me, and at least we would have went to a house away and tried to save you. That's what they're saying in 2025 technology, right? So I FOIA'd them after I ran into my neighbor, because he said, hey, that house that they went to that you found out was them, they're frequent flyers. I started doing FOIAs on them and said, hey, I want a half-hour prior, half-hour post of FOIA body cam footage. City of Martinsburg Police Department, which was sued in 2014 for $2.3 million, said they gave me just them walking up to the house, and then they gave me like 8 minutes of them at 7-Eleven downtown Martinsburg. I said, what is this? So I FOIA'd them again, dash cam footage. They said, oh, we don't do dash cam. So you all know that now, okay? No dash cam. Where else in America is doing that? Right? We're dumb enough to put it in writing, okay? And I said, well, give me all the documents by FOIA when you got rid of it and the date it started. Oh, I don't have that. And Gina Reese, the FOIA coordinator, I will quote, Mr. Joyce, I'm no longer your secretary or your messenger. You know what I did to her? I replied back to her. I said, you've got a week. You can send this over to the police department via FOIA. I'm inviting them to this town hall, and I expect an RSVP. Unless one of you are on the City of Martinsburg Police Department payroll, anyone? That's what we're dealing with in the state. You can't vote your way out of it. You can't FOIA your way out of it. The only way you're going to get out of it is you do stuff like this, and we start putting them on video and hold them to account. That's the only way you're going to get rid of it. And I'll tell you what, we moved here, we left a state that became ungovernable, okay? I will tell you right now, with God as my witness, I am not moving again, okay? I have dual citizenship to Ireland. If I need to be St. Patrick, cast out all the snakes, then God will help me do it. But I'll tell you right now, they're going to find out the hard way, because as of next week, I'm taking a contracting job that's going to pay me well into the 6 figures. I'm going to start suing them, because the other thing I didn't tell you too via FOIA, I have 5 of your sitting county supervisors that I FOIA'd for their text messages and emails, and every one of those cowards will not respond. Okay, that's what you're dealing with FOIA.
Well, I will say a couple things. That first of all, you said voting doesn't matter. I would like your vote next time if possible, as I'm sure Lisa would as well, right? Right, right. Yeah. But the other thing is, I was a political activist for a long time. I will tell you this: You remember when Shelley Moore Capito voted to keep Obamacare? Okay. I might have been operating a 501c at that point, and I went after her real hard on that vote, right? Within a week, two things happened. The least bothersome was the IRS audit, which happens every year now, right? The worst was the DEA shows up and claims that I'm selling drugs out of my house. That was fun. Whenever you start threatening their power, they will fight back. Trust me, when we're sitting down there, the establishment and some of the committee chairs and their speaker's office, they're very heavy-handed. They're very heavy-handed. There were a lot, I can't tell you what was said in caucus, but there was a lot of screaming fights, and I just said, you know what? Not worth it. I'm going to keep my sanity because these aren't Republicans anyhow. So, but yeah, I get that. It just bothered me they wanted to exempt themselves. Somebody on that rules committee has something to hide. So anyhow.
Yeah, well, we didn't vote for it.
Yeah, we didn't vote for
We
it.
did not vote for it. But I just full disclosure, I do like Kevin. So I do. I like Kevin Knowles. I do.
Tell him to bust out some transparency.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, and you can talk to him. I mean, but I do really like Kevin Knowles. But
And Berkeley County does need a Doge done to it.
There's
Do you know
every county in the state.
Every county. Well,
Yes.
do you know
yes, they do.
what the budget is
Yes,
for
they
Berkeley
do.
County? I think they tell you between $52 and $58 million roughly, right? Do you know what the entire budget for the Republic of these United States was the year the Constitution was ratified, adjusted for inflation dollars? An entire nation, military and everything, 173. And they're spending 58 in a little county. There's something wrong there.
Yep.
Something wrong.
Yeah, I
So,
mean, I think so too.
Let's keep moving on to other
We
questions.
need to
Gentlemen
do
over
that.
here.
Getting back to your.
I like the way you put that. The experience of
Who were the lobbyist groups, the organization pushing for it?
The Hospital Association was a big one because they're,
West
you know,
Virginia?
yeah, they're
Yeah.
tied in with WVU.
Yep.
WVU has virtual monopoly,
Yep.
and we all know how monopolies don't work, right? They just don't work. And he was the main lobbyist that would show up. And the reason, because you know, there's always a right reason and a real reason why they don't do things. Well, I guess if you're a lobbyist getting paid a couple $100,000 a year, you're fighting to keep, you know, your monopoly. Okay, let's be honest. That's the real reason. The right reason they kept saying is, well, you know, if we got rid of certificate of need, there'll be no hospitals in rural counties. I'm like, no, every place in every state that has repealed certificate of need, you see increased medical access. You see more innovation. By the way, you see lower cost. Where's West Virginia as far as health outcomes?
Oh, we have a shortage
Oh, well,
of
like,
nurses.
well, we're 49th
Yeah,
or 50th
but we
all
have
the
a
time.
shortage of nurses. We have a shortage of doctors. You know, it's just, yeah.
We have a shortage of health.
Okay.
So,
Yes.
but yeah, that's the reason they gave.
know.
It was I
Like
like my Mountain
crazy.
Dew, but anyhow.
Talk to his wife. His wife just shakes her head. Like,
Right, fear versus facts and campaign donations.
and they're right there.
They are
Like, they
in
are
your
right
face.
There.
Yep.
Like they're in there, and as soon as you walk out the door, they're like, I mean, they never approached me. They didn't approach. I didn't.
Well,
get
I had
approached,
a good, solid Baptist-style argument with one of them, right? And they never approached me again, right? Which was, by the way, as a side note, every night at the Capitol, there are free drinks paid for by some lobbyists,
but- Mhm.
and there's free food paid for by some
Somewhere.
lobbyists. Somewhere, right? I didn't go to a one. I don't think you went.
I went. You went to one. I went to one.
Okay, the same one we
Yeah.
went to, and we
We went
thought
to
it was
the
a Freedom Caucus thing, and we
Okay.
got there, and the Freedom Caucus was afterwards. I'm like, what am I doing here? But because you know,
But it was for
Proverbs-
cold.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, it was Proverbs. You know what this says in Proverbs 23, right? Why you shouldn't eat with lobbying groups or other leaders. If you sit and dine with the ruler, know well what is before you. If you're given the gluttony, put a knife to your own throat, because those delicacies are deceptive. And Solomon knew what he was talking
Oh,
about.
I did went to the drug rehabilitation one. Yeah, to talk to them. because I want to get rid of the Suboxone program. But because I went over there to go, why are we doing that? But that was it.
Okay, question over here.
Well, just on the lobbyist issue. So I'm sitting here listening to this. How do they get in?
What do you mean?
It's free. They can come in.
They can come in.
Oh
Well,
yeah,
you just
look,
have to file as a
we had
lobbyist.
dirty, nasty water on our desks that people came in because they said we didn't do something funding for the floods. So we had
And dirty and nasty is a nice way to put it.
everything in water and plastic bottles on our desks when we came back. So they come in and out. So
Yeah, they have to register as a lobbyist.
Okay,
They
that's
pay a
what I
small
want to know the
fee,
process. Like, how do
and
you-
then they have to disclose their financials, right? Which is fine. Okay. Now, keep in mind, I'm not against lobbying. Okay. I'm not against lobbying. What I'm against are politicians selling their soul to lobbyists. There's a distinct difference because
So are you saying there's more lobbyists there ready to take souls than there are to help souls?
yes.
So how do we get the souls there to help the lobbyists?
now I did deal with the nurses.
Yeah.
And they were very good. Like, they just went back and forth and said, let's put this in, no, we don't want to do this. And they just were helpful.
So how
So-
else can we counter? Can people come and say,
The best we can do in any situation like this is do what Lisa and I did all session long, which is force roll call votes. Get the politicians on record. Yes, I happen to be one. I'm used to not being one, but now I am apparently.
but she said
Get them on record.
pros and opposed,
Right.
pros and opposed.
And you
Expose.
can come to the hearings.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
You can listen
you
and watch.
You can absolutely, because they ask for public people if they want to get up and speak on a bill that you're passionate about. You can go to Charleston and talk
Yeah,
in the
but
committee.
As groups, if these lobbyists are coming in, like this certificate of need or the vaccine, then you have a group of people that are there, playing tug of war.
Mhm.
Well, you don't
And we
really.
did have that. We had a lot of people.
We had that Young
lot of
Americans for
people-
Liberty were helping us.
No,
A
we
few
had
other groups.
also, and the medical freedom people.
Yep,
They were there and they spoke. A lot of doctors spoke. A lot, we did have a lot of that going on the other side too. We did.
Yeah, so
have
there
that.
is a back and forth.
So there is a
but
back and forth.
At the same time, if you're principled, they're not going to come talk to you. I literally talked to, I think, 3 lobbyists. One was a pro-gun lobbyist. I'm going to talk to them, right? One was a pro-life lobbyist. Yeah, I'll talk to pro and medical freedom people. But only one of the moneyed lobbyists came up. And like I said, it was an interesting conversation where we really got to be insulting of each other in public. It was a beautiful thing. And nobody bothered us anymore. Because, I mean, if one of my goals, Dr. Ron Paul told me that a lobbyist wouldn't even bother going by his office because they know he's principled in how he's going to vote and they can't buy his vote. And that's always been my goal for me. So let's keep moving on. There's more questions. Yes, sir.
So my question is in relation to 2014
Mm-hmm.
and how a Jefferson County resident who's a lobbyist went down there and convinced one of the delegates to introduce Mountain Pure to the House floor. And how is it that the delegates aren't held at a level of ethics or integrity for the lobbyists that they enjoy afterwards?
Wow. Okay, that's a loaded question. But okay, 2014 was a different bill. That's a micro
That's a micro.
microgrid
But it's also
bill.
tied to water protection.
But the what you're talking about is the middleweight bottling plant
Correct.
situation.
Yes.
Right. I saw
That's
that happen. I saw the bill come out. As you know, many of you may or may not know, I was very vocal in my opposition to the bottling plant. And excuse me, it has nothing to do with I don't want to see businesses in West Virginia. It has everything to do with protecting the private property rights and the wells of the people in the surrounding area. And I'm sorry, taking 5 million gallons out of the aquifer every single day.
They're being sued.
Yeah. So they're not moving forward right now. Now, if you're talking about 2014, I will give my explanation. You can give your explanation then because we differed on the end vote, and that's fine. I voted for it initially because I was told they were going to amend it in the Senate to 2 things I was worried about. One, the water, because I wanted to have in there a closed loop system so they couldn't drain the aquifer like the bottling plant. And 2, they protect private property rights. They couldn't plant it right beside somebody's house. That's going to kill their property value, right? So I voted for it at first. It went over. I was told we're going to do that in the Senate. Comes back from the Senate, didn't have any of that in it. So I voted against it. Now, I call a lot of grief, but I voted against it. Now, I was told that the Rules Committee is going to take care of that. But as a legislator, I'm sitting there going, I have to vote yes or no on this, and it doesn't have it in it, so I voted no. Right? Now, do I think that perhaps 95% of the time the Rules Committee is going to do the right thing and take care of it? Absolutely, I think they will. I know some of the people in the Rules Committee, and they're very ethical people. But I can only vote on what I had in front of me. That makes sense?
Well, and I voted for it. I was on a Zoom call with people that were going to be with the Rules Committee. And it was explained to me that, because I had the same issues with the water system, I wanted the loop system, water system, that if you put certain things in code, then it would kind of box you in, right, on certain things. You couldn't finagle around. And what they wanted was, we heard this again today, was that they wanted it to be all across the board in the, throughout the state of West Virginia, the same rules that were going to happen. So what happens is if they come to, let's say, Jefferson County, and they say, we want to put this data center here, then it's got to go through the Rules Committee. Is that, is it flat land? Is it your land? Is it their land? This land is our land. And, so they go through all of those things, and then they find out, okay, what kind of water systems are you going to use? What, how are you going to fuel this? Blah, blah, blah. So they go down through a whole list of things that they have to follow, and they have to meet these expectations of what's going to happen. I felt confident that that's what was going to happen after being on a couple of different Zoom calls, that they were actually going to do that. We'll see. I mean, it's going to bring in a whole lot of money. The money that they're going to use, 50% of that is going to go into a fund to reduce our personal income tax. And then each county, if it's in your county, you get 30% of the money. And then everybody, even if it's not in your county, throughout the state gets 10% of whatever money, and that's per capita. That's how many people that you have. So they do a census on how many people, and that's how they're going to allocate the money. So it is going to be a big money maker. It is going to help a lot of different things and get down those taxes. And I don't know. I just really do feel that they are going to have those safety nets in place where they are going to pick places that aren't going to. I mean, we got asked questions today. Well, are they going to put a coal plant next to it? No, that's not going to happen. And I didn't know this. I don't know if you knew this, but the electrical system and how we do energy goes to the east. So so that's not going to happen to us. I mean, so
The thing is, and I can see the huge benefits of this, right? There's some danger and there's some benefits. Number one, if you spend any time in the south of the state, it looks very much like District 12 from the Hunger Games.
yes, it does.
It does. People need jobs. There needs to be an economy. I can see that. I also agree. I put in the bill to eliminate the personal income tax without offsetting it, to get rid of it, right? Obviously, I hate taxes, by the way, if you haven't noticed. I put in that bill. Of course, it didn't move either, and I can only discharge so many bills before they drag me out back, I think, and shoot me. I'm not sure. Maybe I'll find out next session. But we need that. But only if you guys keep a clear eye on what they're doing.
Yes.
Because the problem with Charleston and any government, they have an addiction to what I call OPM, other people's money, right? They have a real addiction to it. And they could go back next year and introduce a bill going, well, I know, 50% of us supposed to get rid of, the tax revenue, supposed to get rid of the income tax. But now we want to fund this instead. So we're going to take 5% out here. Oh, we're going to take 10%. Just like they raise Social Security all the time. So we have to keep a clear eye on them that they don't get that tax revenue from the data centers. Keep your income tax on, by the way, try to raise sales tax again, right? Because they really get addicted, because what do politicians like best? Getting reelected, right? And they like money, but they like two forms of money. The first form is they like campaign donations. But the second form is they like using other people's money to buy votes by showing up and putting in little league fields and dog parks and showing up and getting their picture in the paper. Oh, look what I did. I stole money from somebody else and I'm putting in a little league field, right? We've got to keep a good close eye on them, make sure they do not get that revenue and don't do what they promised.
And there's no supplement money, right? So
Right.
the government's not supplementing any of these grids and data centers. that was a big sell for me. Because as, you know, on the flip side with Form Energy, a lot of the government money went into that, right? So this was, okay, is any government money going into this? No, there's no supplements. But like Chris said, with anything like appropriations, everything, you've got to follow that. And are they spending that money on what that bill was for? And, you know, you have to follow, you know, is that happening? Is that not happening? But then we have an opportunity to vote again. And, you know,
Yeah. Well, it's just like every appropriation. Vernon Chris is the chair. Yes, I named another name. The chair of the finance committee, right? He would bring, if you're not on the finance committee, you don't know the bill when it comes out, and you would ask him, what is this funding? And he'll say something like Medicaid, but not like what it actually funds.
oh,
or
you
higher
hear about
edu-
it on the floor.
Oh, you hear about it on the floor, and when he gets on the floor, he doesn't say what it's funding. So my red no button was constantly, I mean, I think it's worn out at this point. But what they'll probably do, I'm just being frank, on re-election, they'll find something I voted not to fund and go, oh, look, you know, Delegate Andrews hates poor little crippled kids and wouldn't vote to fund them. Nobody told me what it's for besides $155 million to West Virginia University. What? They don't need our money. So.
Yeah.
I have a follow-up question to that. So
Yeah.
there'd be 50%, 10%, 5%.
Right.
It's not written in the bill who's managing that money or how it's to be distributed.
It's written in the bill. So
It is?
yes. So
Okay, I'll
it
go
is
back
going to
and
be
look for it.
distributed. Yeah.
I know it's going to be distributed, but who's going to make it?
I think it's the executive branch.
It's the executive branch. It is, yeah. Because they took out local control, but we still have control. So the legislation, the rules have control. The legislation has control. The rules committee have control over it. So it's not like it's just they're just going to come in and say, well, we're going to plop right here. They can't do that. So there still is some control over that.
And a follow-up, the PJM transmission lines that they're trying to run through Jefferson County to power
Yeah.
the data centers in northern Virginia. Where do you all stand on that?
Well, anything that uses eminent domain, I oppose 1,000,000%, because, you know, you have a right to three things: life, liberty, and property. Right? That's the three things. Those are your God-given rights: life, liberty, and property. When the government's taking away your property to run power to a data center for someone else to make money, is that
In
fair?
Virginia.
In Virginia, of all
In
places?
Virginia, we're not getting any
Yeah.
of that energy.
No.
None of it.
So yeah, we're absolutely opposed to that. I hate eminent domain. I hate the thought that government can take people's private property to allow a business to make money. That's wrong. You got a question back there?
I was just gonna ask about the rain tax. Number one, is there any way to find out how much, where those funds are going? And the other thing is, I get an email from a group called the West Virginia Conservatives, and in that.
That's George.
That's George.
I think in your website that you have, that the House was holding up.
Yes. Because any bill that goes in, the speaker decides which committee it goes to. The committee chairs serve at the discretion of the speaker. And so if there's a bill he doesn't want to move, he will go up and say, hey, Lisa, I gave you this bill. If you let it out of your committee, you're fired. So sit on the bill. And that's what they do. And that's why I turn around and discharge some things, right? Or try to add it as an amendment. I try to get rid of all excise taxes. I had a lot of fun. But pay taxes, I mentioned that one. But yeah, the speaker held that one up. Didn't want to move that one. And what's funny, a little birdie called me the other day about the rain tax. This is something new. I don't think you've heard this yet, right? When Berkeley County, and I need a FOIA request put in from somebody, anybody?
We have a FOIA request specialist.
Yes. I want to see the original application for the MS4 designation, which brought about the rain tax. Because a little birdie called me the other day and told me that the application is fraudulent because they listed Berkeley County as an urban county. And Berkeley County's never been designated an urban county. So they fraudulently put in, now if this is correct, they fraudulently put in the application which got the money, which is now tied to, paying for the rain that falls on your property. So if anybody's really good at FOIAs, I would love for somebody to get me the original application, because if they listed us, Berkeley County, as an urban county, the whole deck of cards collapses.
Yeah,
Yeah, and we don't have that.
and we don't, yeah, I thought so too.
We're actually designated, in fact, there's a map, Berkeley County, we're an residential agricultural county.
But as far as the budget goes and where that money goes, pay attention to the Berkeley County Republican Club's Facebook page. So last month, one of the county commissioners was supposed to come to the meeting and give a whole, PowerPoint presentation on the budget, on the county commission's budget, where the money goes, line by line, and he had a family emergency and he couldn't make it. So we're going to keep trying to get him there. And once he's there, we will put that on the Facebook page. So please, all of you come so you can ask questions like, where is this money going? What are you doing with this money? And that's the only way we're going to find out. It's like this gentleman, you just have to be involved.
Yep.
And unfortunately, in Berkeley County, there's not a whole lot of people involved. So we need to, yeah. Yes.
Oh, yes, they did.
Yes.
Okay, real
Yes.
quick, and I'm going to say this in public record. State Senator Jason Barrett, 16th District, his wife Summer Barrett, their lobbying firm is being paid over $200,000 by the Berkeley County Commission to go to Charleston and lobby.
How can that?
I put in a bill
Yeah.
to eliminate taxpayer-funded lobbying, because if you're a county commissioner and you last time I checked, the phone lines run from Martinsburg to Charleston, I believe. It's your job to go down there and do this, right? So, and I just did that public record. I said it a lot, so I'm sure I'm not exactly loved, and she doesn't exactly, because I was told, I was in a meeting with her when she was pushing real hard for this tax. I was told I was small-minded, that I didn't want to increase taxes. Well,
I mean,
we'll talk a lot about it. How's that?
It's out there now. I mean,
we were on the radio
just put
talking
out
about it.
everywhere.
No, but we were on the radio talking about it. I've been
Yeah.
on the radio talking
Yeah,
about
we
it.
were on the radio last
And
week.
so,
talking about
as you can see, we're probably public enemy number one.
Well,
that-
for me, my big thing is that 1% was under the guise of, and I say this tongue in cheek, but I mean it, under the Safer Communities Act. But if you really are really worried about the safer communities, that money could employ 3 police officers right away, or 3 EMS right away, or whatever. I mean, so I think, again, if he does show up at our meeting and has the budget and shows us where all this money is going, pay attention to when that meeting is, and so you can go and really ask the questions, the hard questions. Well, what does that mean? Or where does that money? Or what is that? And I think that's the only way we can get that transparency. Where is our money going? That's all we want to know before we raise taxes or we do something different. Where is the money that we already have going?
And by the way, the lobbyist also has about a $40,000 budget to wine and dine politicians. And you can request FOIA and see who's been out wining and dining. Someone else had their hand up? Okay.
Governor Morrissey, I think, is planning on calling a special session.
Uh-huh.
DEIA.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
What's your plan?
Well, there were several bills that were put in for that.
Right.
2 of which I thought were pretty good, decent ones. One was to replace it, have employees put in money to their own insurance, and they could get their own insurance if they wanted to. They could either use the money for PEIA or they could use the money to get their own insurance. So that was one plan. The other one was to just totally get rid of it completely and give that money that they're spending on the PEIA individually, not them, us, the government spending it, but how much money average does it cost each employee to have this insurance, and give that money back to the people so that they can get their own private insurance. Right now, PEIA is just not going to be sustainable for long. It just isn't. So
It's a train wreck. I was part of the crew that said, hey, tell you what, the government stinks at everything it tries to do, including running an insurance agency, right? Government's horrible at it. So why not we just give a tax-free stipend, to the teachers and say it averages about $9,000 a year, okay? And they can use that to buy their own insurance. Simple. Get the government out of it because we employ, I forget how many employees they have. They have a pile of employees over at PIA that we're paying for in addition to everything else. Well, let's just simplify it. Let's give them money. Listen, we underpay our teachers. They're not paid enough, right? They can go to Loudoun County or Washington County, and hopefully we can get the trigger law passed that the money follows the students, the free market kicks in, good teachers make more money, other teachers don't. But I would very much love to see that privatized, because the only thing government's really good at is taking people's money and killing other people. That's my 2 cents. That's what's the government good at.
So hopefully, yes, we'll have a special session.
Yeah, so hopefully we'll be able to, but I guarantee you we'll be shouted down.
Will the health insurance
Well, the health insurance, if you watch the Obamacare mess, the health insurance, in the end, it was the health insurance companies that wrote the Obamacare bill. So they're the only people that really still like Obamacare, because the left doesn't like Obamacare, right? And the right doesn't like Obamacare, but the insurance companies are making tons of money off of it. Yeah.
I'm just gonna say this is my last thing. So, you guys were talking about getting people to vote and forcing them to vote. I love it 100%. So one of the things that I think is like the big pink elephant in the room in state politics that not enough people are talking about. I own a business.
Mm-hmm.
Vivek's running for governor in Ohio. He's talking about deregulating that state more than Texas. And I said, hey, if that happens, West Virginia might force it, even though I don't want to.
Mm-hmm.
I was promised on the debate stage 4 candidates for governor, all claiming to be quote unquote conservative, okay? One of which, who got beat up in the first debate and decided to go home and take his football and sit in his house in Harper's Ferry, right? So when he took over the governor's seat, we went from 600 million up, which ironically is coal money, which could blow up in our face literally any second. Now we're 400 underneath. According to my calculation, that's $1 billion, okay? Somebody in the private sector would be in jail for embezzlement instead of sitting in the Senate. So apparently, if we're not going to be spending money, we don't care about that. I'm going to challenge you. We are sitting in a house of God right now. As Republicans and conservatives, I'm going to ask both of you to highly consider introducing a bill to make adoption $1 in the state of West Virginia. And you will find out who the Republicans really are and who aren't. Because at the end of the day, what I tell people all the time, this state is almost 80% Christian. We do not need to wait for Oklahoma.
Supposedly, just like it's supposedly 80% Republican.
Yeah, Republican.
Okay.
But we do not need to wait for Oklahoma. We do not need to wait for Utah. We do not wait for Texas. We should be the reddest state in the union. And we should be attracting people leaving Minnesota, or like in my case, we left California. We came here. We just ran into a couple from upstate New York. They said, we're dying in West Virginia. We're not moving again, right? You put out a bill to deregulate adoption, which if anybody's ever gone through this, it's insane.
My daughter's going through it right
And
now.
to deregulate the state lines too, okay? But if you compare that to Planned Parenthood, we got rid of abortion in West Virginia, but we really didn't. I was like, because like you said, with that bill with the chemicals, you drive down to Charleston, there's still signs advertising out-of-state abortions. That should be illegal. That's an illegal activity in the state of West Virginia now.
You can go to Hagerstown.
Yeah, Hagerstown.
Well, let me address the budget thing real quick, okay? Justice said we were 600 million to the good.
Off the top of my head, he said it was 600 million.
Right.
above.
Because he took a lot of one-time money
One-time
and
spend.
pumped it into the budget, right?
And he did that in his private life too.
Right. Okay. Well, what he does in his private life is his private business. But I disagreed with him on the budget. Now, Morrissey, if we had continued the budget as it was written, we would have ended up 400 million. But somehow, in the end, and again, if you're not on the finance committee, they don't tell you, I just knew the budget was bloated and I voted against it, right? We're not given that information. But I believe Morrissey was correct when he said, as we currently stand today, because it wasn't one-time spends to throw at it. And, you know, a lot of times Justice would do things like that. And I'm not a Justice fan in any way, shape, or form. So,
But if you guys introduce that bill, you force the vote, so deregulate adoption, make it $1, okay? Deregulate the state lines, you will have more than enough ammo to get rid of those people.
I agree. I think we ought to deregulate everything, but also there's some realism with this too. We're coming out of 83 years of Democratic rule with a lot of red tape. So a lot of the bills we passed this time
It was like
were
8.
repeal bills. We're
It was
pulling
like
it out.
8
Yep.
deregulation bills.
Yeah, a ton of deregulation bills. Now, could we do it cleaner and quicker? I'd rather do it all at once. Like, let's face it. Anybody have high electric bills? Maybe. A few high electric bills? Right. I heat with wood, and my wife ran the wood stove in January when she was home, and I got a $541 electric bill when I heat with wood. My backup's oil. Right? We need to deregulate energy too. We need to allow competition. Right? I'm a free market guy. We need to allow that to work. So there's a lot we need to do in the state. I can tell you we're fighting our best and doing everything we can and making more enemies than friends down there. But a good friend of mine once told me, the more hated you are at the Capitol, the more loved you be at home. The more loved you are at the Capitol, the more hated you are back home. And you see it with some people. So.
I have a question about that solar we were talking about earlier.
Oh, the solar mess.
Yeah. So there's nothing we can do to stop it, right? County, when it's coming up.
Well, Trump's supposedly cutting off all the money for the Green New Pipe Dream, right? And you know, the thing with green energy, besides it doesn't really work, is it relies upon other people's money, taxpayer money, to subsidize it for it to be able to stay afloat. If Trump pulls that money, and by the way, that money is filtered to West Virginia through what's called the Appalachian Regional Commission, ARC, which is run by who? Anybody know? Gail Manchin. Anyhow, that makes sense? And if that money is not going there, they just announced it. If there's nobody should subsidize another business, right? The free market should determine what succeeds or not. There's a good possibility to go away. I put in bills, Lisa was on some of the bills, to eliminate all subsidies and not to allow any subsidized green new pipe dream business in our state. And that includes, has anybody driven near Davis and there's a million windmills everywhere that aren't working and killing all the birds on the planet, right? It's a train wreck.
And most of them are stopped.
And
what gets them started again? Electricity.
Right. And what's funny is a lot of bills went in that. Delegate Ward was really against those. I mean, Brian Ward was slamming his fist. He was furious about these things, as a lot of us are, because they're taxpayer subsidized, right? But they all go to where? The Energy Committee. Who runs the Energy Committee? Look it up. Delegate Anderson, been there for a very, 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 very long time. And Delegate Anderson was appointed by who? Speaker of the House. Not one of those bills moved. Not a one. Not a single
And
one.
the other problem with the solar farms is too, is that you're getting, farmers are wanting to get money for their farmland, and they're, being told, oh, it's going to, we'll give you all this, we'll give you all that. So they're doing that too. And that's one of the things they tried to push this time too, is agritourism. I can never say that word right. Agritourism. So that farmers have an option to maybe have, grapes and stuff, to have a vineyard or whatever, instead of having to sell their land for this because their kids don't want to take over the farmers. And yeah,
Incentives to keep farms.
what?
Yeah.
Incentives to keep farms.
Right,
Yes,
like farm to
but
table food, stuff like that.
Yeah, that's true too. But
Yeah.
a lot of these farmers are old; they want to stop, and their
Right,
kids
but
don't
if
want to
you
do
carry
it.
on to their
But if you,
kids,
yes,
they have an incentive to
yeah,
make
they'd have an
decent
incentive to
living.
do it. I agree. And the solar farms are dangerous. Let's
Well, yeah.
be clear; they're
Absolutely.
dangerous. When they crack, they
Jefferson
leak
County,
poison
they just had a
into the
fire.
soil. Yeah,
When they catch
And
on fire, we don't have the equipment
we
to
don't
put
have
them
the
out.
equipment to put them out.
I mean, Berkeley County already approved that one coming up there, right?
That would be the PSC in Charleston that would approve that. I don't know. I just saw that literally
I heard through
the other day.
grapevine, the only
So.
way we can stop it is to get the citizens
That's up near Falling Waters area?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not the one on the DuPont site. That was on the
No.
brown zone
One
there.
near
There's about
Truck
one
Horse.
west of there now.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's up there. Tyson Road.
No, they haven't. The
Yeah, it's
Bennington
Bennington one. Okay. All right. We'll have like 2 more questions, and then we've kept you guys all night. But anyhow, no, go ahead. Go ahead. Jefferson County? Yep. Yep.
No, they
Right.
don't.
They don't.
They don't. The chief of the fire department in Jefferson County, who's now a
Commissioner, Mike Mood. Yeah.
Mike Mood was like, Lisa, it's horrible. They couldn't even put one out in New York for 2 weeks.
Because all the money's behind. Yeah.
Well, it's hard to get people involved. Yep. But you're here. I mean, this room should be packed. But this room
Yeah.
should be packed. But the thing is, and I don't know if this is true or not because I wasn't born and raised here, but I have friends that were, and we talk about this. And the thing is that people that were born and raised here, they really think that West Virginia is okay. And it's slowly, the rug slowly being pulled out from under them, and they don't realize that it's happening because they look at it as, it's everything's okay. What do you mean that's happening? That's not happening in our schools. That's not good. So when you go door knocking and you're talking to people, I don't know if Chris gets this, but I'm like, they're looking at me going, that's not happening here. Yes, it is happening here. So, when you have been in an area in a state as beautiful as West Virginia, and you're happy and you have your land and your home and you're just happy, you don't realize what's going on around you. You don't have kids in school anymore. You don't know that this is going on. I think a lot of that's happening. And unfortunately, like I said, this room should be full with people concerned about what's going on in their counties, in their state. And it's not because, everybody, it's okay. Or they're focused on the federal level stuff.
That's it.
And not really on the local stuff.
Because they think they can make a difference.
And you're so removed from Charleston. When we were in Charleston, the people that are delegates in Kanawha County and all that, boy, were they getting hammered. But stuff that was going on with us, it's like, I didn't hear a whole lot from my constituents, maybe a little bit here and there.
No, I got screamed at by a lot of people out of state.
Yeah, but it was out of state people, Canada people, California people,
The death threat people. The death threat people.
The death threat people, the rape people, I got a lot of that, but not a whole lot of people, because this is really a media desert here. When we're in Charleston, around this area, it really is a media desert. When you're there in Charleston, I was pretty sorry I got delegate plates riding around in Charleston because they know everything that's going on, and it's not conservative because it's a city, so it's not conservative in that area. So but
it's funny, you were saying you were talking to constituents and they didn't realize the thing that's going on. It's funny, when I met my wife, this is a funny story. She originally grew up in Romania. I met her years later, but she grew up in Romania, and one of the first things she told me is, I'm glad I live in America, in a free country. I'm like, do you? and I handed her a copy of The Revolution by Dr. Paul. But anyhow, that being the case, a lot of people don't know. I mean, the way that we look at things, and maybe I'm speaking out of turn, but the way I always look at things is government is instituted to protect your already pre-existing rights, right? People came together to collectively protect your pre-existing God-given rights. That is the only moral job of government, period. It's not to pick winners and losers. It's not to give your tax money to some company like Bill Gates who wants to come here, Form Energy, right? Government is to protect your rights so you can achieve your dreams, right? It's not supposed to just give you free stuff that they've stolen from other people, right? Government's gotten so off track. And I'm hoping that we can keep working and building movement in West Virginia. That's kind of the hope with forcing the roll call votes. You get people on record, maybe somebody who's more like us might get that seat next time, right? And start to build a movement. Because, you're not going to change history with one election. And you're not going to change history in one decade of elections, right? you have to look long range. And that's where the left is better than us sometimes, because they look long term. And we're all just worried about this little fight right here. We're not looking at the long term implications. And we need to start fighting a much more deliberate war and start getting good people that be transparent, people that be good protectors of your life, your liberty, and your property, which includes the money you earn. And that's my biggest hope, is that we can start a movement like that in West Virginia. So,
And I just want to say, full disclosure, I was one of those people, right? I lived in Maryland. I didn't know what was going on in my, I didn't know who the mayor was or who was on my board of education or anything for years and years. And then it started getting really bad, and then it's got worse. And then, and my grandson was here. He just left, but he's the one that said, well, the problem is everybody's focused on the federal level.
mm-hmm.
No one knows who their mayors are, their board of education. And he was 13. And I was like, wow, you're right. And I don't. So when I moved here, I got involved, and right away. But you have people that have families, and they just come home from working a long day of work, and, it's not so bad. And they're, so, they're not in the heat of it, anymore right now. And so until you get in the real heat of it, and then it's too late sometimes, right? Then you become Maryland, and you don't want to become Maryland. Trust me, you do not want to become Maryland.
How many expatriates from Maryland do we have here?
Yeah.
Okay, there we go. Majority of the room.
Refugees from the.
And we're going to have that from Virginia soon, because
Yes.
Virginia is going to go solid blue.
Yeah.
Yep. That's
So,
enough.
yeah,
They're
so
going to go
that's-
solid blue.
So
So
you
it's
get
coming.
that happening, but it's like tell your neighbors, tell your friends, when you know that there's political things going on, say, come with me, bring a friend, whatever, try to get involved, because we don't want that to happen. Gosh, I didn't move here from Maryland. I don't want to move again,
Right.
and I want to stay here. I want this to become, and stay this free, Mountaineers are always free. And, I want this
Not
to
yet.
be a free state.
Not yet. We're working on it.
I want that to happen, but it's going to take people doing it and working together. And unfortunately, a lot of people don't have the time, or they don't think they have the time because they have families and they don't want to put the time in. But, just voting, I think we had the lowest turnout of voting ever in the primary. They did come out for the general because they wanted to vote for Trump. So,
870 people
Yep.
voted out of a possible 6,300.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes, it was like 13%.
What people need to realize is two things.
It's like 13% of people voted.
Just because you might not have an interest in politics doesn't mean that politics doesn't have an interest
That's right.
in you.
Absolutely.
And finally, and this will be my leaving points. We've been here for an hour and a half. I'll be here for questions afterwards. Individual liberty means personal responsibility and protection of that liberty on you. If you're waiting for a politician to save you, you've already lost. Right? So
Amen.
that's what I have.
But with mayor in Martinsburg,
Yep.
why go vote for mayor when it's two Democrats, one run against each other?
Well, and then we did change that law too, that
Now they have to
voting
go
is
on
all going to
election
be
day.
on one day. So that's going to be good. So all the people we're voting for is going to be on one
Yes.
ballot. But yes, it did.
That did pass.
That did pass.
And
Voter ID.
one last
too.
thing. The most common question I got when I knocked doors, because I knocked 6,000 doors. I talked to voters. These are people that vote every election. You know the most common question I got? What is a state delegate?
Me too.
And I told them in
Me too.
response, I'm more important to your personal freedom than who's president.
Absolutely.
Because in a republic, which we are, you're a constitutional republic, it's your state that really matters. So hopefully they'll give me another shot at it, but I'll keep fighting.
Yeah, me too.
So I think at this point we'll break. I really appreciate you guys coming out on a Tuesday night and spending an hour and a half.
Thank you very much.
But we'll be here for questions, but I've had a lot of Mountain Dew, so I'm heading back here. I'll be right back.